It's 2021. You completed your BA in ASL English Interpreting last year. You have been able to do small amounts of interpreting work as a substitute in educational settings, both K-12 and post-secondary, as well as a team assignments with your former internship mentor. It is now early January, and you will begin working at a local university doing 2 ongoing undergraduate courses this term that meet up once per week for 3 hours each session. Approximately 1 week before classes begin, you receive detailed information about courses, instructors, deaf students, and team with interpreters whom you will be working. Okay, and situation 2. It is the same deaf student for both classes. You know this deaf person from their involvement in various interpreting program activities. You will be working with a different team interpreter for each course. One of the interpreters, Joanna, you are familiar with, as she is quite involved in local interpreting and deaf communities. The other interpreter you have not met before. Okay, 3 minutes. What are you thinking about as you consider preparing for your work at this university? What demands are at play? What actions, controls might you take prior to the first meeting of these courses? Okay, if it is the same deaf student for both classes, I know the deaf person, and I will be working with different team interpreters for each course. So I am familiar with the other interpreter, and one of them I do not know. So if I will be working with a different interpreter for each scenario in each classroom setting with the same deaf consumer, then if for the interpreter that I have worked with before, I will probably feel comfortable with her and or him or they and know their boundaries, hopefully. And for the one that I'm unfamiliar with, I will hopefully be able to have some sort of conferencing before. And I say conference as in just like a quick meeting saying like, hey, this is the deaf consumer that I've previously worked with. I don't know if you've met with this person before or worked with them. This has been my experience. These are some typical signs that I've used with this person, and just let the interpreter that I have not worked with in on any information that I know, and ask them if they have anything to add or if they have any experience in this type of setting, things like that, just so I can get to know my own level of comfortability and what I should be expecting from them as a team. Also, maybe asking them their experience level in interpreting, like if they're brand new, just graduated like me, or if they are experienced interpreters with several years. So my I think before the courses too, I would separate from the interpreters, I would want to find out the topic of the course so that I would be able to do as much research on it as possible, so I can become familiar with the terminology and possible topics that could come up. And I want to make sure and check in with the 2 people that I will be teaming with on this and ask them for their extra linguistic knowledge, just to see if they have anything that I might not be able to find on the internet, because the internet is not always the most reliable place for information. It's a great tool, but if I'm looking for something I'm unfamiliar with, then I feel as though it may not be the most efficient way to get information at times. So I would conference with new interpreter, do elk knowledge, and get perspectives from both interpreters. Ooh, good timing. Okay, moving on. Situation part 3. Oh, don't go back. Okay. Last night you had a successful and supportive experience working with Joanna and in the psychology class. Teaming went smoothly, and the deaf students seemed satisfied with the work and the fact that you would be the one interpreting, or one of the interpreters for the team. Yay. Okay, situation part 4. Tonight you were interpreting for the other class, sociology. Prior to arriving tonight, you found out some basic background information about the team interpreter, Liana. whom you'll be working with from the interpreter coordinator and the other team interpreter. She has been interpreting for 20 plus years, has deaf parents, and never went through formal training. She works full time in another job that is unrelated to interpreting or the deaf community. She works part time at the university interpreting one event course per term, or one evening course per term. Your first opportunity to meet her and talk with her was about 10 minutes before the course you were both interpreting began. You both introduced yourselves, and she began telling you about how exhausted she was from a long day, and that all the way home, all she could think about was how she wished she could just go home. Okay, and then prompt 2. What were you thinking? What will you say to Leona? Spend maximum 3 minutes. Start. Okay. So I was thinking while reading this, sociology, not super familiar with that, but again, if I was aware of the class topic, I would be able to do some background search information on that. And it says, oh, right, prior to arriving, I found out some background information. I forgot about that. So anyway, first impression of Leona, probably great sign language skills, deaf parents, so she's a CODA. That means that she's going to probably be, hopefully, reliable. The part about formal training doesn't really bother me as much, just because, everybody comes from different walks of life and different experiences with sign language, so the fact that, she didn't get a degree isn't a reason for me to not trust her skills, because I would much rather have a person demonstrate that they can do the job, because sometimes people get degrees and then they aren't good at it, if you get what I mean, So, and then her talking about how exhausted she was and how, she's just had a long day and all she wants to do is go home. I'm thinking probably same, because life is hard, and I will probably respond to her saying, okay, well, just let me know if you need extra support, if there's anything that you need from me to make this go easier, if you feel like you're overwhelmed or that you're not able to interpret a certain thing, like, I will definitely be here to support you, and let me know if there's anything going on in your mind, like if you need to step out of the room to, take a breath or something, just to kind of collect yourself, and let me know. Yeah, I would definitely just want to make sure that she feels supported and that I'm not just going to say, well, tough it up, because that's not what I would want somebody to say to me if I was in her situation, because we all have long days and they can be really difficult. So definitely I would talk to her, say, hey, I'm here for you. Let me know what you need. If you're feeling like you can just push through it and you'll be fine, awesome. If not, please let me know. We can have a conversation with the deaf consumer and let them know that you've had a really tough time or a tough day, long day, you're tired. So maybe if you're feeling, that you cannot produce the product that's satisfactory for the deaf consumer, then we can all just have a conversation with about that if we feel like it's necessary, and to let her know that we've all been there, because I don't want her to feel like, oh, I've had a long day and blah 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 blah, and then just feel like she can't trust me to support her. Oh, again, perfect. There we go. Okay, moving on. Situation part 5. You decided to try and steer the conversation politely to discussing strategies for teaming, so that you could get a feel for how she works with a co-interpreter, and so you could share your preferences and needs. Every time you attempted to bring up the issue of teaming, she simply said, I'm flexible, don't worry about me. The most you managed to discuss and agree on was switching every 20 minutes, and that she would begin. Situation part 6. It is now the second week of classes and the second session of the sociology class. Since you didn't have time prior to the first class to discuss some of your needs and teaming preferences with Leona, you made a point to share some things with her after class last week. She seemed open and said that she was not used to teaming in the way that you were proposing, but that she would give it a shot. Situation part 7. You both determine that Leona will begin again this week. After you switch, she stays in the room and appears to be attentive. She's able to provide you support when you ask for feeds. All in all, the teaming is going much better than it did the last week. During the first break, after 1 hour, Leona says she needs to leave 40 minutes early tonight because something has come up. She suggests that she can interpret longer than 20 minutes right before she has to leave, and that way you would just have the 40 remaining minutes to interpret and be rested since you had a longer break. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Leona? What is influencing your decision to apply this way? 3 minutes. Go. Okay. The fact that she was receptive to trying a new way of teaming that she wasn't familiar with is awesome, and that makes me feel good because that shows that she's open and to trying new things and to communicating and trying something that she's never done before. So that's awesome. When she said that she had to leave 40 minutes early, it did kind of raise a little bit of concern just because I get it because stuff comes up and situations, sort of come out of nowhere sometimes. And if it was an emergency, totally get it. But it's still a little concerning because then I'm getting left out, I'm getting put out to, I'm left hanging. That's what I was thinking. I was left hanging and in that situation, interpreting for 40 minutes, since I don't really have a lot of experience interpreting, that sounds like a longer amount of time to me. And if it's, been a long day and maybe I have an injury or something like that, then that would be a little bit tough, right? Because if I'm relying on the break, or the more like consistent 20-minute swap, then that could be an issue. But in this situation, it doesn't say anything about that. So, she says that she has to leave 40 minutes early, and she could just interpret longer than 20 minutes so that I get a longer break. So at least that shows me she's trying to compromise and she's thinking of me instead of saying, like, okay, I'm ready to go. Which is good because I would rather her give me the heads up and try to troubleshoot than just say at the last minute, hey, I gotta go, and then leave. And leave it all up to me to interpret the last part of the class, because that could bring in a lot of stress and anxiety that I would, I think, get in the way of my process. And so what's influencing me to reply this way is that I definitely try to be accommodating, but because I want to be able to understand other people's perspectives and reasons for doing things, and I want to be flexible as well. But at the same time, if something came up and she really, really had to leave, I can't force her to stay there. I can't do it. I can only control myself and how I respond in the situation. So I would much rather take her little breadcrumbs of I'll work with you, like let me try to do something so I'm not just leaving you high and dry. So then that way we're working towards some sort of compromise instead of me just blowing up and saying like, well, that's not cool of you. Why are you leaving? You signed up for this job. You better stay. So I'd rather be flexible and reach a compromise than not have anything to work with at all. So yeah, compromise is better. Okay. And now, moving on, part 8. Okay. It is now the 6th week of classes. You have gained some confidence and comfort. Teaming has continued to be great in the psychology class with Joanna and has continued to be okay with Leona in the sociology class. The only thing that is uncomfortable now is that Leona has left 40 minutes early twice. Ooh. Again, this week, Leona says that she needs to leave early. She lets you know that she has another interpreting job and that she must leave early from the university in order to arrive to the other job on time. Prompt 5. 5 minutes. Okay. Start. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Leona? What actions will you take? Why? Okay, so what am I thinking? If everything has been going smoothly, awesome. But the only thing that's bothering me is that leaving 40 minutes twice has happened now within the last week. So for me, I'm definitely the type of person who wants to give people the benefit of the doubt because I don't want to think that people have ill will, and I don't want to think that somebody is trying to take advantage of that. if this is the second time that Leona has left 40 minutes early, um, then that would definitely raise some suspicions, and I would probably think more along the lines of like, okay, well, does she really have somewhere to go, or is she just tired and wanting to go home? Does she think that this is kind of a normal thing because she hasn't um, teamed with interpreters in this specific way before? Is this just, does she think it's not a big deal? Like I would be thinking all of these questions, like what's this really about? Because if she does legitimately have another job that she has to leave early for, okay, but that's also her responsibility to make sure that she's not double booked, because that's not leaving a good impression of her and how she's working with other people. And that's also stretching yourself too thin, which is not good for her, So I would be thinking, what would I would be thinking probably all those things. And then how would I respond to her about leaving 40 minutes early again? Um, I would say, well, I can't force you to stay. But I would appreciate maybe next time, if you and I work together again, that you don't double book yourself where you're needing to leave a job early, because um, this is a commitment, and I'm not trying to be the boss of you, of course, because you're your own autonomous person. But I'm just letting you know that I would really appreciate a little bit more consideration for me as an interpreter, and I'm sure that other people might appreciate that as well, because when you leave early, sometimes it gives off the impression that you're not as committed, which I'm not accusing you of that, but that it gives off that look, and I I would caution against that, because not everybody is going to be understanding, and not everybody's going to say like, oh, okay, go for it, So just be careful about breaking commitments like that. And then what actions will I take and why? I believe that the actions that I would take for her leaving 40 minutes early, again, I would say, I can't control you. Go do what you got to do. Let's reach a compromise, hopefully, like we did last time, so we can work something out where I have maybe a longer break so that I get to rest before I interpret for 40 minutes. And I would, depending on her reaction to that, and to me telling her all of these, like, oh, well, be careful of, leaving early because of how it could look. I would probably just hope that she would want to compromise again, and maybe have another conversation later. And so maybe I can suggest, okay, but I think that we should have a conversation about this later if we're going to continue to work together, because I don't know if I can sustain this type of um, work where, you leave early and then I'm just like straining myself at the end of every day, because that could be damaging for myself as an interpreter. I don't want to, just push through at the end of the day because you had to leave and you double booked yourself, because that's not my mistake. That was yours. And that decision has an effect on me as well, because if we're teaming, we're in this together, and I need to know that I can rely on you to be there for me. Because what happens if something happened in the 40 minutes that I was interpreting? Like, what, I don't know, something, I slipped on the floor, banana peel, I don't know, maybe I pulled something, maybe my finger got crushed in a door, door jam, something like that. So I would say, like, okay, like, I can't control you, go, but I just want to let you know that I would appreciate a little bit more commitment from you, and a little bit more, I guess, professional courtesy in that way. So have a conversation with her about that, probably not right then, but later, and try to just communicate expectations, like workplace expectations, and how her decision impacts everyone. Okay, moving on. Situation part 9. Oh, no, don't skip ahead. It's now the 8th week of classes. You are feeling comfortable in the psychology class and are enjoying working with Joanna. You have learned a lot from her and appreciate her support. Students have a written exam and are quietly working. You and Joanna debrief about the work in the class quietly in ASL during the exam. Then she asks you how interpreting in your other class is going. Quote, your team is the class, is that class, your team in that class is Leona, right? I hate teaming with her. She's so unprofessional. I can't believe she's still getting classes here. How's it going with her? Okay, prompt 6. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Joanna? Why? Okay, and then 5 minutes. Start. Oh boy. Okay, so thinking. Wow, that's a little bit of a pointed comment to make. I mean, I get it because she is expressing her frustrations, which are valid because if somebody is leaving, then and maybe she's had other frustrating experiences, those are valid as well. But I would. I'm thinking I'm uncomfortable answering this in a classroom setting because even though we're not actively interpreting for the deaf consumer, we're still working, and that feels a little bit weird. Um, and I would have preferred for her to ask that question. Your team in that class is Leona, right? How do you feel about working with her? So then that way it gives the conversation more of the opportunity to not go to a negative place and go into more of a because that also puts a lot of pressure on me because if I don't say, oh yeah, I hate teaming with her too, then that can cause a rift in our relationship, and then she could, Leona could, or not Leona, Joanna could possibly see me as being defensive of Leona, and it could just cause a lot more drama than it would need to. So by um, uh, phrasing the question differently, saying like, how do you like working with her? What's your experience been? That leaves it more up to me to respond neutrally and say, oh, it's different, it's new. So there are some challenges like always, but just to leave it vague enough so then that way I'm not having to respond in an equally negative way and feel pressure to do that. All right, moving on. Another question: how will you respond to Joanna? From that question, she's so unprofessional. I can't believe she's still getting classes here. How's it going with her? I would most likely respond. There's been some challenges. I would hopefully try to respond vague enough, saying, "Oh, there's been some challenges. We've worked through them. She's been good at communicating certain things with me. But we have been working through them and trying to discuss our issues with each other, so then that way there's not workplace tension or something like that, or something, maybe not even acknowledging the fact that there are tensions because I don't want to discuss that in a workplace environment where it could negatively impact me and then make Leona look bad. I would hopefully respond with something like, there have been some challenges, but I'm all good. And if you want to talk to me more about this later, then, you know, I might say more later or something like that because I always feel icky to shutting people down, saying like I don't feel comfortable talking about that, which of course is a perfectly acceptable thing to tell somebody if I am uncomfortable talking about it. But for me, sometimes I have trouble being direct, especially if I'm in a workplace environment. So I think I would say something along the lines of like, yes, I have experienced some challenges working with her, but we've worked through it or we're working through it and we're trying to have professional conversations surrounding um, those challenges. Leaving it like acknowledging that yes, there might be some negative feelings there, but we're working to resolve them because I don't want to just focus on she sucks, she's terrible to work with, I hate working with her, because then I'm gonna create more of a schema of Leona as a person and thinking that like, oh man, like she's the worst. So like every time that I will team with her, I'm not going to come in with the optimistic mindset of like, okay, there's been some challenges, but we've been successful in working through them in the past. It'll just be like, oh, I hate working with her, and that is going to not only affect my process and how I take feeds from her or how I work with her, but that she'll receive that energy as well, and then maybe not be able to trust me as well, and then uh, as there's also another element, the deaf consumer, right? And the deaf consumer might be able to pick up on like, oh, my interpreters aren't working together and they're not giving me the quality of information that I need. So hopefully, I'd be able to create a little bit more of a dynamic where it was, yes, challenges, but we're working through them. So, because I don't want to have that sort of idea of like, oh, she's a bad person, I don't want to work with her, she's terrible, because if you have a conversation, things can change. Ooh, man. Okay. Okay. Last thing, reflect. What did you learn about this yourself through this process? Upon reflection, what values do you notice at play in your decisions and processing from these situations? What most influenced your decisions through this process? How will you use this information for your professional and ethical growth? Spend 5 minutes responding to this. Okay, start. Oh, what did you learn about yourself through this process? That I'm really good at rambling. I uh, I learned that I am a lot more open to um, the word starts with the C. Compromise. There we go. I'm a lot more open to compromise. Um, because which sort of stems from I don't like conflict, so I would much rather try to reach an area where both parties are benefiting from it slightly than nobody at all. I learned that um, it makes me feel icky when other people bring up negative feelings about another coworker in the workplace environment, and I think just in general I'd feel weird because that was a really direct comment that Joanna made uh, about Leona. Like, I hate working with her. Like, that's really strong. So I learned that made me feel very uncomfortable, um, which is good because that also teaches me to not talk about stuff like that in a workplace environment as well, or in any environment really, because I don't want to talk about hating people ever, because I don't like to hate people. Um, and then upon reflection, what values do you notice at play in your decision and processing from these situations? So I've noticed that I value compromise a lot. I very much value making sure that everybody is somewhat satisfied with the outcome of the decision that's being made. So I value other people's comfortability as well as my own. I value um, kindness towards others, even if I don't have necessarily the most positive experience with them. Uh, because again, I don't know everybody's story, so I don't want to assume that this person is a bad person because I've had a bad experience with them. Um, and so and what else? What else did I learn? I learned that talking through them out loud helps me come up with ideas for what to do in these situations, which is going to be hard because I can't do that in the moment when I have conflict. I can't just like turn around and talk to myself. That'd be weird. So then maybe something that I could do would to be just take notes. That might be kind of weird, but I might have to play around with that. So just having a way in the moment to process it instead of um, just holding it all inside and like dealing with it. So maybe writing it down or writing about it afterwards might help me. Um, so what most influenced your decisions through this process? Um, Honestly, I mean, I don't know if this sounds like bad, but like the avoidance of conflict. I don't know if I've said this already, but I very much don't like conflict. It feels very icky. Um, and I don't like being caught in the middle of negative feelings and people feeling negatively. That's just not something that I thrive in. That's not an environment that I thrive in. So, um, but the thing that also influenced my decision was definitely making sure that I was comfortable too, because I don't like being a doormat anymore. Used to be a really good doormat. Don't like doing that anymore. It's not fun. Um, Last question: how will you use this information for your professional and ethical growth? I think the way that I'll use this information for my personal and or professional and ethical growth is to just keep in the back of my mind that the way that I phrase things really matters. The settings that I say them in really matter because because in that situation too, like who knows? What if the deaf consumer saw that? And what if the deaf consumer like knew Leona's deaf parents or something like that and then told them, oh, these interpreters hate your daughter, right? Like, you never know who is seeing or hearing what you're saying or signing. So I want to make sure that the person that I present in my work life and in my personal life are pretty similar. I don't want to show up to work and be, oh, I'm super nice and positive, and then when I go home, be talking negatively about people, because that's not who I want to be in everyday life. I want people to be able to trust me, that I'm a good person in the workplace and a good person outside of the workplace. So I want to make sure that I'm reflecting that in my everyday life and professional life as well. Woo! All right, all done. Next slide. Thank you. All right, well, this is the end. Peace.